Jackie. Occasionally, I do some work as a charity auctioneer on weekends for various causes around town. So I'll be the exact opposite of that persona for today.
Okay, we're going to start in 10 seconds. Welcome to today's news briefing, co-hosted by California Black Media and Ethnic Media Services in collaboration with the California Housing Finance Agency. I'm Sandy Close, EMS Director and your moderator. Our focus today is on the millions of Californians, homeowners, first-time home buyers, renters, small landlords, currently facing the threat of foreclosure, of getting evicted, or of never being able to buy a home. With eviction moratoriums ending and pandemic-related relief packages timed out, people feel there's nowhere to turn. Ethnic media need to spread the word that there is free housing counseling available across the state. Help from real people rather than complicated online applications that wind up with dead ends. Our speakers include veteran housing counselors who will discuss some of these options in addition to current foreclosure and eviction protections that may be available. We will also hear from two people at the center of the housing storm about the free help they received from HUD-certified housing counselors to resolve their challenges. To lead us off with an overview of the housing crisis landscape and the good news about the free help with counselors across the state, we welcome Eric Johnson, Information Officer for the California Housing Finance Agency. Our second speaker is Linda Jackson, Executive Director of Inland Empire Resource Center. Ms. Jackson will talk about why she is hopeful resources are expanding to address the housing crisis in her region. Our third speaker is Mava Elise Brown, Executive Director of Housing and Economic Rights Advocates, HERA, who provides counseling statewide, but who will talk about the housing crisis in the Bay Area. We will then hear from Mr. Sebastian Garcia, a homeowner facing foreclosure, and from Ms. Toni Stovall, a renter facing eviction, about the help they received from HUD-approved housing counseling agencies. EMS will send a recording of today's briefing to all attendees, along with bios and collateral material following the briefing, including a list of HUD-approved agencies across the state, and our own report of the briefing. We ask speakers to speak slowly as I'm speaking, so our interpreters can interpret in Spanish, Korean, and Mandarin. We ask reporters to enter questions in the chat box. We will have Q&A throughout the conference as time permits. So now for our first speaker, Eric Johnson with the California Housing Finance Agency. Mr. Johnson.
Sandy, thank you so much for putting this together. And a huge thank you to the more than 70 members of the media who are gathered here today to help us spread this message that there is help for California homeowners, folks who are renting, small landlords, anybody who's involved in housing at all. First off, a little bit about the scope of the problem. There's terrifying stats you can read in the paper every single day or on the web, but I think I'll just lead with two here. As of January, there were 721,000 families who owed more than $3.3 billion in back rent. That's more than $3 billion owed. That was late rent. Now, you think of initially, okay, that's a lot of problems for the renters, but then you have to also think of the mom and pop landlords who actually make up a really large portion of the people who rent out places in California. It's not just the large companies with the big, gigantic complexes. It's duplexes, it's quadplexes, it's somebody's ADU in their backyard, somebody who needs that rent money in order to make their mortgage payment. So it cascades up. The other really important statistic, and why we thought it was so important to have a meeting with media from around the state, is that the majority of people who are rent burdened in California, that means they pay more than 50% of their income towards rent. The majority of the severely rent burdened do not speak English as a first language.
Wow.
It's about 36% speak Spanish at home, another 4% speak Chinese at home, and 12% of people speak another language. So the majority of people who need the help aren't getting the messages in English because they can't understand it. And that's horrible. And that's why we're here today. And that's why it's so important that you are able to get this message out into your communities and help let people know there is help. So what this is a National Mortgage Settlement Counseling Program. The state of California has right now about $75 million, $73.5 million to be precise, to help people and get free counseling at dozens of housing counseling agencies around the state. These housing counseling agencies are HUD approved. That means the federal government has approved both the counselors in the agency and the agencies themselves. There may be folks out there who are offering counseling that will be monetized, asking for charges. That's bad. There's fraud going out there, just like there was back in the Great Recession 12 years ago. People offer to pay off your loan, that sort of thing. We really also want to get out the message that you want to talk to a HUD-approved counselor, because those are the people who can help you out, and their help is free. If somebody asks somebody for money to help them with their housing situation, run away as fast as you can, because those people aren't going to help you out. You always want to go to the free counseling. So how it works is we have a very simple website. You can Google it at CalHFA NMS, and also Sandy's going to be sending out our information. And what that does is it hooks you up two ways. One, you can call a number where you will be directed to someone who can help you out. Also, we have a list of housing counseling agencies on the website. Right now, we have 76 different counseling agencies that employ more than 217 housing counselors. As Sandy said at the start, it's so important to talk to a human. If you get into a voice tree or having to press 1 for this, press 6 for that, press 7 for that, people will give up. If you have to try to enter in a bunch of information on your phone or on a screen, people are going to give up on that. It's so important to talk to a person who can talk to you in language and get you the help you need. So what happens is when you are able to talk to one of these counselors, they'll have you come in. You can also do it remotely via your camera. You can do counseling just over the phone if you don't have an internet connection. It's something that's important that anybody, no matter what their ability to get there, should have. And they'll come in, they'll talk to you. You can talk to people who are having difficulties with their rent, people who are small landlords, difficulties with their mortgage on the backside, people who are homeowners who are worried about foreclosure, also people who are looking to buy their first home, people who are renters and who maybe have enough money and think, hey, it's time to make the leap. These counselors can also help the folks who are trying to build their first home. So far, we've helped about 23,000 families through this program, and we have the money and the capacity to help a whole lot more. There are some expirations coming up. March 31st is the end of the period where people can apply for emergency rental assistance in the state of California. So we really want to make sure this message gets out there, get to a counselor, and then see if you can apply as fast as you can. That's the quick overview of the program. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Linda and Tony and Mr. Garcia about how their programs have actually helped people. And again, thank you so much for being here. The importance of this message and there being help is really, it can't be overstated. So thank you so much. Sandy, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Johnson. Let me ask you, tell us about that deadline of March 31st, because that's an important point that we might need to emphasize in our reporting.
Certainly, there's something called the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which of course, since the government has an acronym, ERAP, and it's administered through the Housing is Key program. And what it is folks can apply, and unfortunately, it's all an online process. But here's the thing about counseling: the counselors can help you out with that application. And what it is, it's an application to get some relief from your rent, for rent that you're behind, starting in March of 2020, right when the pandemic started. So we urge everybody to get online. They're accepting applications until March 31st. If you apply before the 31st, you'll be in the system. Even if you get a partial application, you'll be in the system. It's really important to get your name in that system. I think Linda can probably talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, we have a question from Emmanuel Otico. Could you ask your question, Mr. Otico?
Yes, and this might be a more of an economic problem, but I think one of the issues is that a lot of people are in a very precarious situation because the rents and the mortgage prices are so high, and the cost of living hasn't kept quite up with that. Would you agree with that, Mr. Johnson?
There's no doubt that wages have not kept pace with home prices or rental prices in California, and of course, with the cost of homes to buy a home going up, that means that people who previously would have been able to purchase a home are still in the rental market, pushing up prices in the rental market. It's just a cascading series of things, and I'm really hoping that people can talk to a counselor and figure out what to do. I know there's the governor and the legislature are working on trying to figure out how do we solve this problem. It's a step-by-step thing. There's no magic bullet, a piece here, a piece here. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. We have a question from Mark Hedin. Mark, do you want to ask your question, or shall I read it?
Well, I want recently. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
That's the first question. Okay. I read that the federal government has been able to reallocate some of the COVID relief funds that from states that weren't using it to ones that needed it more, like California and New York. And I'm wondering if that doesn't perhaps work to extend the anti-eviction funding and program longer, or maybe not yet.
$36 million, so it's a nice big chunk of change. As of now, the deadline has not been extended. I can't speak to whether it will be or will not be extended.
Okay, thank you.
But what was the actual difference made by the money you referenced for counseling in the state? Could you clarify that?
That $136 million is in addition to the emergency rental assistance program. So it's more money that can help people pay their back rent. It's not necessarily for the counseling side of things.
The program of counseling, has that received additional funding? And is that expanding the network of counseling counselors available?
Yes, we started out with an allocation of $50 million, and then we received an additional $23.5 million. So far, we've gone through about $36 million of it, about half of that. And as we use more, I'm hoping that we will be able to allocate more funding to it because the need is so desperate.
Well, this is great. I have one more question, Mr. Johnson, and then I hope you'll be there to also answer questions in the chat as we hear from our other speakers, and we'll be coming back to you for a final round of questions.
I'm sticking around, no doubt about it.
Okay, there is a lot of distrust about government-related support programs because people got caught in these online mazes and very frustrated and very discouraged. Are you saying now that housing counselors are real people, as I indicated in our introduction? And can you just leave us with that final image that there's a real person with legal expertise who's available to answer somebody in really facing the loss of their home.
Yes, there's real people who will talk to you. It's my Spanish is too rusty to try to say hay personas en realidad que pueden hablarle, but there's people there. You're going to be hearing from one in about a minute and a half.
Thank you so much. And now I'm excited to go to one of these real life people, too good to be true. It's tremendous to welcome Linda Jackson, the Executive Director of the Inland Empire Resource Center. Linda, thank you for joining us, and tell us how you see the housing landscape in your area of the state, and the fact that, as we talked about in our earlier conversations, you're optimistic that help is actually expanding. So this is a time we all need good news.
Amen. And thank you so much for having me. And let me first say, slow me down, because I'll get so wound up and I'm so passionate about what I do. So you'll have to just slow me down, okay?
Hey, all right, I'll interrupt if you're going too fast.
So let's just add to what Eric just said. It's very important that I reach out to you quickly to get you the help that you're going to need regarding the rental relief. I did put my information. It's a intake form, and if you just fill that out and just hit submit, it'll come back to me, and I'll be able to get back to you if there's anyone that you know or you yourself may need any of the help that I will talk to you about today. Now, with the rental assistance, and I've been talking about this all over, I need to get you in the queue ASAP. Yes, we have until the end of this month. Yes, we did get more money to cover. And I want to say, Eric, and I'm not sure, I think the governor just released $2 billion to cover what's already in the queue to make sure we can take care of the people who are waiting to get approval. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say about the rental relief, it is not just for tenants. It is definitely for the landlords. I have clients that I have partnered with property management companies. And it's a lot easier when I'm with a property management company, because when I submit, we hold your hand through the process to go through this. It could be overwhelming when we send you, like you were talking about, people don't speak the language, so they don't understand what and how to do when they're online with the computer. So we walk them through that so that the application can be submitted. But more importantly, we do these pop-up events that we can actually help you to make sure that we have a completed package. That is the key in order to get it approved. So meaning that all of the documentation that will be required to be submitted, it's a tight package for Housing is Key to make a decision. But the one thing landlords must know is that it really is going to go to the landlord to make sure that the information that the tenant has put in, you agree with it. And also, you want to make sure there is no fraud, to make sure there is a tenant there who is trying to collect. The money will never go to the tenant. It will always go to the landlord. So the landlords really want to make sure they're in on this and they're paying attention. So that's the other thing. I know we don't have a lot of time, but we still have time to get you in the queue, if that makes any sense. So my intake is in the chat, and you can, fill it out and get back to me so I can get you or anyone you know in the queue. And so that ends on March 31st. The other thing that housing counselors can help you with, if you are a homeowner, and let's say you've tried everything humanly possible to get help on your back rent, Cal HFA, that's Eric, who was just on, they have what's called the California Mortgage Relief Program. That program is a grant to you homeowners that are behind in your mortgage, meaning your mortgage payments. You can't pay your mortgage payment. You can actually get help up to $80,000 to help with your back mortgage payments. All is COVID related. The grant, meaning you don't pay it back, that amount of money that you owe, and I'll tell you how far it goes back, it is not put on the back end of the loan like it was done 12 years ago in 2008. All that monies that you owed was put on the back end of the loan, and it had to be paid off if you sold the home or tried to refi. In this case, it's given to you. So that's something that's different. And let me say why it's different. It's different because we've never been here before. This is the first time. So that's important for us to know. So let's say if you've missed, and let me say what the eligibility is, the requirements are. You only have to be 2 months behind to qualify for the grant program to get the mortgage relief. And Mr. Garcia's got that relief. So I'm talking about something that we have actually helped our clients get. And on top of that, when Mr. Garcia got the mortgage relief, he also got what's called the loan modification, if you recall that, because he still couldn't afford the monthly payments even after we put him through the mortgage relief program. Not only did he get the loan modification, he didn't have to come up with any documentation. That's almost unheard of. That didn't exist 12 years ago. And that was called the flex mod. And the reason why I'm taking you through this is because you won't know to ask these questions. You would only know this if you were dealing with a certified HUD counseling agency who actually has this knowledge when they're talking to the servicers. So that's really key, is why Eric is saying to you, you definitely want to reach out to a housing counselor. In all of this work that we do, it's free to you, the consumer. We not only have that for you, the consumer, because I'm telling you all the wonderful things that you have the CFPB, who is the financial, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. All of these acronyms, sometimes I can't always remember them, but that bureau is actually for you, the consumer, so that you will have that protection when you're not being treated properly. So that's first. Always remember, it's the hardship. The hardship is what will get you the help that you need. So the hardship. So that hardship can go all the way back to January 2020. So I'm saying that's how much hope you have, because if you're fearful of being foreclosed on, just like if you were fearful for being evicted, that's why we're saying contact a HUD counseling agency that can definitely help you with that. So the package, you don't want to do anything without letting us see your package first. That's very, very important. So that's something that one of my other clients got, was called, he got the mortgage relief, and then we coupled it with the flex mod, because he wasn't ready to be able to show documentation because this job wasn't definitely secured. But if you don't use us, you wouldn't know that you didn't have to turn any documentation, because most people are afraid that their documents are not put together properly. So that's key. So
Linda, can I interrupt you just for a minute and ask you to take a step back and tell us a little about how you see the housing crisis landscape in the Inland Empire and what makes this such a unique time. You had a remarkable term that you said, this is not a mortgage crisis, it's a debt crisis. Could you tell us a little about that, because it'll help us with our reporting?
absolutely. So what I mean by that, I only compare it to 12 years ago. 12 years ago, it was a mortgage crisis, meaning that people got in subprime loans or loans they shouldn't have gotten into. This time around, it's not that. You were paying your mortgage. It wasn't about subprime. You had a good job, but the pandemic happened. And when the pandemic happened, it became a life and death crisis. So when it became a life and death crisis, I'm saying to you is that there are so many, I want to call them parachutes, that you all have that you didn't have before. Just talking about the monies that are coming down just to help you right now is the key. If you are a senior, there's so much help for you right now. And 12 years ago, we didn't focus on that. Now we're focusing on things that we never focused on before. You could never get any type of help without turning in a full package. You could never get a grant where it would pay your back payments and you didn't have to pay the money back. This is what I mean when I'm saying to you, because it's a life and death crisis, things have to be done totally differently than it was ever before. And that is the reason why I don't want you to give up hope. I don't want you to be fearful about losing your house. I don't want you to stay up all night not knowing what to do. Does that help you, Sandy? I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry, I muted myself because I was coughing. I would like to ask, why are you optimistic about resources of the kind Mr. Jackson was talking, Mr. Johnson was talking about?
Because we've never got this type of funding. The bills that are coming out right now, Sandy, I'm just going to talk about one that came out today, just to tell you why I'm so optimistic about what's going on. This was a bill that just came out by HUD that they announced $2.6 billion are awarded to helping the homeless. So homelessness was never addressed like it's being addressed just today. And that is why I'm so optimistic about the help, because we cannot throw the homeless away. We have to help them more than ever. And we will be able to because of the money's coming out. And not only that, Sandy, we also have a bill that's on the table. It's AB 2217. And that bill we're going to talk about also, you mentioned first-time home buyer. Well, a first-time home buyer doesn't even stand a chance in this market, right? Because there is not affordable housing for a first-time home buyer. And this bill that has just been put on the table this month is for that very purpose. So I'm saying that's why I'm so optimistic. I'm sorry.
Okay. That is great. I want to ask one question from the chat, which is really based on your on-the-ground experience and perspective. Vidya Setter Rothman asks, I see so many available apartments in most of the neighborhoods, some empty for many months. Why aren't rents dropping? And maybe if you could address that before I then go to one of the renters that you and other counseling agencies have been so helpful for. If you could address her question.
And I'm gonna make it really quick because of supply and demand. That's why, I mean, landlords, they want top dollar. I'm sorry to say, and they see it the opportunity and they can seize the opportunity. And that's one of the reasons. But for this new bill, that's part of it, where they're going to use a lot of this vacant property and be able to rehabilitate it, rehab it, and so that we can use it for, I want to say, first-time home buyers. So you know, we can always circle back. That's why I put my intake in the chat. You can also fill that out and submit it, and it'll come straight to our counselors, and we'll get back to you with questions. Is that
Okay. Yes, that's perfect. Thank you. Now we're going to go to Ms. Tony Stovall for her firsthand account of as a renter facing the possibility of eviction, and your experience, Ms. Stovall, in reaching out to housing counseling support. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, how are you? Again, my name is Tony Stovall, and I actually rent a property in the Inland Empire. I was one of the people during the pandemic that actually kind of stayed on top of my rent and paid it all the way up until things got a little tight for me, and I got behind on a few things. I heard a few people talking about the rental assistance, and of course, I figured, you know, you had to meet some type of criteria, and I thought it was going to be really hard, you know, to get it, but I said, let me still try. I tried to do it myself. I'm not going to lie. I did try to do it myself. But again, like you said, I'm not really savvy like that with certain things. So for some reason, it just wouldn't accept my, as I was trying to upload the application, it just wouldn't accept it. So I finally got, you know, found myself getting a little frustrated, and I contacted Karen Wiggins over at Inland Empire Resource Center. I explained to her my situation and told her I really needed help with the rental assistance program application, because at that point, my rent was significantly behind. By the way, I do want to say really thank you so much to Karen and Linda and everybody over there at Inland, because when I say they really walked me through it, they really helped me and walked me through it. I do understand with things like this, it is a process. So I didn't want to get discouraged, but it did take me a little minute. So I was kind of like on the fence and was unsure, but Karen kept assuring me that everything was going to be fine. Any documents that I needed, I did hear Linda touch bases on that. Any documents that I needed to turn in or submit, they do make sure that they stay on top of you, because it is a time frame. So everything that they asked me to submit, I always did it. And Karen made sure that the application process went through with no problem. I've never really seen people so vested in helping you get the funds, because like they said, a lot of people were going through a lot of different issues, but sometimes people just don't know that they can get the help. I think back on the time when Karen did finally inform me that I had been approved, I almost started crying because it was so much on my plate at that time. I couldn't believe that it went through, because again, things like that, normally you have to meet a certain criteria, you have to be on a certain, and I just didn't think I was going to get approved. But I felt a sigh of relief once I was approved for the funds. With the program, I do want to say you have to have patience. As long as you get your application and submit everything that you need to, I promise they will take care of you over there at Inland, because they don't let you drop the ball. I'm the type too, as far as programs like this or anything that comes about, if somebody tells me something or I know something, I don't really tell people until I actually know that it goes through, because you don't really want them to come back to say anything to you. But since then, since I've been approved, I have referred so many people over there to Inland, and I mean, everybody has gotten approved for funding. And some people were really, really behind, like a year or so. So if you take the time, sit down with them, turn in all your application stuff, I know for sure, I'm a witness, they got me the funding that I needed.
Thank you so much for sharing that. There's a question from Brianna Reeves with Black Voice News in Riverside. Brianna, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, hi Tony. As Sandy said, I'm a reporter in Riverside, and I just wanted to ask maybe what advice do you have for renters in the IE who have previously had maybe some poor experiences with rental assistance programs? What advice would you have for them who are currently seeking other options? You know, this Linda has this is another option. What advice do you have for them who feel like they've been waiting for a while for assistance?
You know what? One thing I will say, I found when I tried to do it myself, even with calling in, it just did not work out for me. I don't know if it's just they know at the agencies like Inland and so on and so forth, but it just seems like when you go through them, it's less of a hassle. I pretty much had everything, all the roadblocks that I was catching before. So for me, I would say that somebody that's on a deadline or on a crunch time and really need the services, I would say get help. I wouldn't try to do it myself.
Thank you.
That's important. I am going to go now to our third housing counselor, veteran housing counselor, Mava Elise Brown. Thank you, Mava, for joining us. And you will be giving us an overview of what you're seeing in terms of housing challenges in the Bay Area and your best advice that we can pass on to our audiences about accessing help from housing counseling programs such as HERA, yours. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. And I'm so glad you're doing this program on a really important issue because there's some great resources out there that are not so widely known. And when people don't know about reputable resources, then they end up sometimes paying money. And I'm thinking about homeowners who've gotten wrapped up in foreclosure rescue scams, paying thousands of dollars in fees to realtors, real estate brokers, actually to auto dealers who decided to go in the foreclosure rescue scam business in some cases, and my fellow lawyers also who have been in the fray committing tremendously horrible scams. So there's a lot for people to keep their eyes out for as vulnerable homeowners. I'm using that as a starting place for the conversation. And I will talk about our tenant clients as well. When we refer to housing counselors, there are HUD certified housing counselors, and I think are some of what the group has been discussing so far. U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development funds a housing counseling network across the United States who cover a broad range of issues for homeowners and prospective home buyers, and some of them for renters as well. We're a nonprofit law office at HERA, so we're a little different. We work statewide. We're based in Northern California physically. And so in addition to providing counseling to people who are homeless, people who are renters, people who are homeowners, we're also engaging in some advocacy on behalf of people to access housing or to hang on to their rental housing or to hang on to the family home. Challenges that we are seeing are vast. I started a little bit with homeowners. Let me circle back and actually talk about what some of our tenant clients are facing. They are facing significant rent increases, frequently illegal rent increases, especially in parts of our state that don't have rent control laws or in types of dwellings that are not covered by our state rent control law. We're seeing habitability problems on a regular basis, just refusal or failure to make repairs. It is very messy out there, I will say, for a lot of landlords who feel resentful about non-payment of rent. getting a lot of pushback in response from small landlords in particular, who are wondering how they're going to afford to make repairs without rent, not realizing that they're legally obligated to continue making repairs one way or the other. But I'm saying this because it's a messy time period, and our emergency rental assistance program has not functioned as well as any of us would have hoped, but at least it's there. So habitability problems, disability discrimination every week seems to be the last bastion. Everybody knows race discrimination is wrong, gender discrimination is wrong, LGBTQ discrimination is wrong, and all of them are also illegal as well as being wrong. But disability discrimination seems to be where a lot of folks seem to fall short. So those issues remain. I know it's the highest amount of complaints that our State Department of Fair Employment and Housing gets every year. But
could you give us an example of a disability?
Yeah, absolutely, Sandy. So one of the types of protections that you get so that you have fair access to housing if you have a disability is you have a right to reasonable accommodation of that disability. And it's a lovely broad term that basically means, look, owner, property owner, landlord, you got to work with me so that I can fully enjoy my unit like anybody else. And that might mean allowing me to have my caretaker live with me. It might mean shifting where my parking place is. It might mean, I'm thinking of one client's case, she had laundry installed, a washer dryer installed in her unit, which was generally prohibited for all other units, but she couldn't get out of the house. And that was an accommodation for her. So what's wonderful about the notion of reasonable accommodation is it's the right to get what you need within reasonable parameters so you can fully enjoy where you're living. So those are just a few examples. So in this messy time period, this cleanup time period, huge, and I say cleanup, I mean from the pandemic, huge pressure still on, and a lot of fear on the part of tenants about what's going to happen to their credit. Will there be ongoing collections? We do have some state laws that offer protections for tenants on both fronts for debt that was accrued, rent debt accrued during the pandemic. On the home ownership front, we also have a lot of vulnerability of older homeowners of color, home energy scams, and a lot of anxiety for homeowners who are recovering from their financial woes during the pandemic and needed help applying to the state's homeowner assistance fund or to funds that some of the local counties or cities have. And avoiding being caught up in the pressures of strangers knocking on their door, telling them they're going to fix things for them when they actually are just going to get them into trouble. Let me stop there in case there are questions.
There are, and we have a question from Araceli Martinez, which maybe any of our speakers may want to address, but you also, Mava. Araceli, I'm going to read in the interest of time, I'm going to read your very eloquent question. The other day, I did a story about 2 street vendors who were left on the street after the family that rented them rooms in their house was evicted by the sheriff in Pacoima in the San Fernando Valley. The vendors did not know that the owner of the house had an eviction process. So they ended up living in the park, even though they paid their rent on time. Is there help or protection for people who rent rooms in a house that is in the process of being evicted, but through no fault of their own? Mava, I know you've addressed that question, so maybe you could answer that, and then we'll go back to all our speakers with additional questions.
Yes, especially first of all, that's just horrible. And I'm really sorry that this happened to them. In our high cost state, we have more and more families, households, especially during the pandemic, that have doubled up, tripled up, taken in roomers. And so we have a ton of master tenants now who don't understand that they are governed by landlord rules when it comes to notifying, working with their tenants. That's one little piece of the puzzle. But for the property owner, so what I've heard from your question, Araceli, is that there was a master tenant who was renting this home and then brought in roommates. And the people that are stuck living in the park were the roommates. That there was no direct rental relationship between those roommates and the owner of the property. If there had been a direct rental relationship, the eviction should not have happened. And also, there are some protections under our state law in terms of service of process. So if the master tenant was being evicted, the summons and complaint had to be structured in a particular way to include unnamed residents. And I wonder whether it was. I would encourage that household still to circle back to San Fernando Valley Legal Services to get some guidance on, for them to review the summons and complaint that was filed to see whether there's any ability to go ahead and get back into the home. And remember, I said that something shouldn't have happened, or the law should protect. There are still illegal things that happen all the time because people don't know what the law is or just have bad faith. So those are a few of my thoughts. I don't know if my other colleagues on this at this meeting have other thoughts.
Linda, anything you want to share on that kind of issue?
I desperately do, because I've worked with Ms. Brown over the years during the mortgage crisis. I have sent her so many clients, and I know it's been so many years, but she is the wealth of knowledge. But you know, that's happened too. I've seen this happen and gotten the calls as well. And the one thing is that, man, if they were renting there, if they had any type of document or paperwork that showed that they were, you know, a renter, and that, you know, I would say to Ms. Brown, if they weren't served, then you couldn't evict them. And so, you know, you could go on and on and on. But if anybody rents a room from this point forward, I tell them all the time, you're going to have to make sure there is a lease agreement that you have with them, some type of protection with them. But I would always refer back to Ms. Brown to help me with some of these questions, because I'm not an attorney and I can't give legal advice as a counselor. So I always had to have her close by to ask her questions about just that very thing. So that's happening to a lot of people right now.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to ask Ms. Stovall, as a renter in the Inland Empire, what kind of fears and just what are some of the experiences of other renters that may not know there are housing counseling services available and legal services such as HERA available? What do you see among your fellow community members that most worries you on the housing front?
You know, actually, I did have a friend that was rather behind and didn't know about the services. And it had gotten to the point, like the young lady had mentioned before, it had gotten to the point where her landlord wasn't even fixing things. I mean, you had toilets that weren't working, you had, you know, plumbing issues and things of that nature. And when I introduced her to Inland over there, she was able to get the assistance she needed too. Because again, a lot of people, when you don't know how you're going to pay your bills, don't know how you're going to pay your rent, it's a lot. And, you know, it alters your mood. So at the end of the day, she was having work issues. You know, believe it or not, this program is really what you need. But like I said, it's kind of hard to do it by yourself. So I recommend that everybody goes through at some type of agency to get the help, because it's just hard to do it.
Right. Thank you. I'm going to go to some of our questions in the chat. And then with the last question for our speakers, so please hang in because these questions are really, I think, very important. Alfonso Sierra, do you want to ask your question about landlords?
Yes, Sandy. Basically, what I wanted to ask is, should landlords need to receive some type of education by counseling centers as to what the liabilities as landlords are, and for them to know the tenants' rights?
Mava, do you want to answer that?
Sure, I can kick that off. I mean, you are becoming a small business owner when you are a landlord, and the responsibilities are huge. And yet there is no required education process. I think localities are beginning to get hip to the fact that it's absolutely necessary. Not everywhere are they getting hip to that, but for example, City of Oakland's rent adjustment program contracted with our office for about 3 years to provide an information space, no representation, but information for small landlords, because for the first time the city was bringing very small landlords under their jurisdiction, and they had no clue about what the rent regulations were, etc. And so the city also created a workshop series that it ran. And so I'd love to see more cities and counties doing that.
Thank you. We have a question from Rosanna Huang. Rosanna, do you want to ask your question? And just in the interest of time, if we don't connect to Rosanna, let me ask your question for you. The Fed raised on March 16th, 2022, raised interest rates. What impact will be happening to the housing industry as a result? Could we ask Mr. Johnson to address that?
If I could answer that specifically, I'd be making $1 million a month. Unfortunately, the impact of interest rates in general, you could make the hypothesis that means that interest rates will be going up, but interest rates for housing and for home purchase have already been inching up recently. So there are much more intelligent minds than mine that are working on this, trying to figure that out. So I wish I had an answer for you, but I think the best we can say is we don't know. Especially with all the instability in the world right now, there's so much else going on that interest rate range is one of the many factors that's going to affect the housing industry. Oil, war, climate change, you name it.
Okay. Henrietta Burrows, can you ask your question?
Yes.
What's great is that this is coming from all over the state. So these are great questions.
Thank you, Sandy.
Sorry.
That's okay. The financial assistance has been out there, but I'm wondering, have homeowners and renters been able to obtain the available funds on a timely basis to ease their financial hardship?
Let's go to both Linda and Mava on that question. Linda, you first.
I'm going to say no. It hasn't been on a timely manner. So, but I want to say this: we've never been here before. The systems that were in place, they were overloaded, and we ran out of money, and it was just overwhelming. And so it's a bottleneck, definitely. But when you work, I'm going to say it again, work with a professional who is working with the agencies. I'm actually funded by Cal HFA. And so understanding that if you're dealing with housing is key, I can pick up the phone and call Eric and say, hey, look, I'm getting this pushback and this is the problem. There's someone that I can connect to. And that is the reason why it's so important that you want to use someone who is already tied into the system. Like I said with Miss Brown, she doesn't even remember. I bugged the heck out of her all those years, but she was my go-to person because she had the legal expertise. So you go ahead, Miss Brown, and you can take it from there.
Well, I mean, I think your response is perfect. I think really a huge takeaway that if there were one thing that everybody let their readers, viewers, listeners know, is that there are free nonprofit resources that are reputable to help you if you're a renter or if you're a homeowner and facing a challenge. and that those should be always your first choice, because everybody else out there seems to be promising pipe dreams. It is true, just to echo what Linda said, that the emergency rental assistance program really struggled with getting funds out there in a timely fashion. But I mean, it was a huge task. It was a really huge task, and relying on a lot of subcontractors and with particular program rules as well. So not easy. Similar situation now with the homeowner assistance fund. I think the target number was to get $40 million a month out the door. I think 7 million. Ooh, was it 7 million or 14 million that went out last month? Either way, fairly far short of the goal, but it is a new program. And I remember how long it took for Keep Your Home California to ramp up to where it needed to be and wanted to be. And so, and there actually is, the state is actually now working on a next step to get boots on the ground of funding legal services programs, nonprofits, to help the public for free to get through the maze. So that's coming next in the next couple months.
Thank you. I'm going to take one more question and then ask a final round of questions. Michelle White Mendoza. Michelle, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Sandy, for organizing this, and thank you for all the panelists for being there and informing us about this important subject. I would like to ask you, what can we do if a person submitted the application for rental assistance, COVID rental assistance from Housing is Key, and that was back in January and has received no response? And how can we follow up in that process? If it was completed, the application was complete.
And now, as you say, that person is behind on rent and
Even
okay.
More in depth with rent and utilities.
Okay, Michelle is based in the Bay Area, so Mava, can you take that question?
Sure. Who can best confirm that the application is complete? Was your question, Michelle, right?
Or what should?
No, it was completed because, well, the internet said it was complete. So I just wanted to follow up on that.
Yeah, I think from our end of what we're seeing and hearing as advocates and from other advocates is that there's a significant jam in place, difficulty and that this is a problem across the state in verifying which stage an application is at. This is tremendously problematic for tenants for multiple reasons, one of which is if you're going through the eviction process. And on the plus side, in protection of tenants, a property owner has to prove that they attempted to seek the funds. But the question is, you walk into the door and the landlord says, I have an application pending, and that's all they know. And that might be all the tenant knows as well. What's the court going to do with that? What can the court do with that? So your good question, Michelle, just highlights a problem that advocates are trying to figure out with the state.
And I have another question. So it would be positive to share our case number and the status of our application with the landlord, of course, right?
But if I could just get you to share that with me, I might be able to help you with that, because that's something that I've been able to do, not with a large property management company, because I'll send in a large spreadsheet, and then with all of the information there, I've been so grateful to Eric and his staff for where they have been able to help me really fast. So if you could put that in an intake, fill out your information, get that to me today with your case ID number and your name, I might be able to get you an answer right away, because I'm working on a list of clients already, and I am getting a lot of good feedback on that. So,
okay,
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So we have time for one question from one speaker, and I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative and ask Mr. Johnson. to address a very important question. You made an extraordinary data point that almost, I think you said almost half, if not more than half, of applicants were limited English proficient. And I just wanted you to repeat, we have many Asian media on this call. To what extent can people with limited English proficiency, especially Asian languages like Korean or Chinese or possibly Burmese, to what extent can they expect to get assistance through this remarkable network of housing counseling agencies?
Well, as I said, you know, it's not applicants, it's people in California who are severely rent burdened. And more than half the people in California who are severely rent burdened do not speak English as a first language.
That's
so that's what we're really trying to mitigate with this program, with this briefing today, getting the message out to those people who don't speak English as the first language to say, even if you don't speak English, there's still hope for you.
Very good. Thank you. We're now a minute over the hour. This has been just a tremendously helpful and also hopeful media briefing with some remarkable frontline counselors, a very important person in the form of Eric Johnson, helping to drive this briefing. And Ms. Stovall, thank you for sharing your personal experience and perspectives. So altogether, thanks to our media, we will be sending a recording of this, including in-language interpreting. And we are so grateful to our media for providing the messaging we hope will reach a wider audience of people challenged by the housing crisis in our state. This conference is now adjourned with my thanks.